Japan, a country that is unique with its history, culture, and mythological stories. The year 660 before Christus is accepted as the National Foundation Day of Japan. Religious literature, lifestyles, and the rapid innovation process that started in 1868 during the reign of Emperor Meiji caused Japan to gain considerable power in Far East Asia and become one of the developed industrial countries of the world, together with Europe and America. The world politics, which was based on empires until the First World War, continued with the collapse of empires and America's step towards becoming a superpower after the First World War. In 1931, Japanese policy was centered on the following stages: to seize strategic places in Asia, especially China, and to dominate the Pacific Ocean. Japan, one of the world's leading countries in economy, technology, and war industry, invaded Manchuria in 1931. Within a few months, all of Manchuria was captured. With its powerful navy, it gained naval superiority by surrounding Russia in the north and China in the south. These invasions were not recognized by the League of Nations and America. When objections and criticisms to Japan's invasion increased, Japan, believing that the League of Nations had closed the possibilities of expansion to it, left the League of Nations in 1933. 3 years later, Japan allied with Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy and signed the Anti-Comintern Pact, the unification of these three totalitarian countries, and their actions began to worry America. At that time, there was no power in the world that could resist this triple alliance. Europe had not yet recovered from the exhaustion of the First World War. President Roosevelt therefore sought to establish friendly relations with Latin American countries and Canada in order to get the Congress to recognize the need for more funds for armaments. By 1940, World War II had already started, and Hitler had invaded France, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and Belgium. In the same year, the Japanese captured Indochina. By 1941, a neutrality treaty was signed between Japan and Soviet Russia, and the Japanese guaranteed themselves against the Soviets. In the same year, the American President Roosevelt demanded the withdrawal of Japanese troops from Indochina. When this demand didn't find a positive response, Roosevelt froze all Japanese assets in the United States and imposed an embargo on oil supplies. The British and Dutch governments simultaneously followed suit. Thus, Japan was at once deprived of its vital oil supplies. This was a big problem for Japan. At the time of the embargo, Japan had enough oil stocks to last 3 years for normal use and 1.5 years for full war use. Therefore, Japan urgently needed access to oil resources. For this, the Japanese had set their eyes on the oil deposits in the East Indies. However, in order to reach these oil deposits, they first had to overcome the American base in the Philippines. America had outposts in Guam, Midway, Wake, and the Philippine Islands. During this time, the United States of America, which was rapidly armed, had also landed the Great Pacific Fleet in the Pacific Ocean. This Pacific Fleet included 8 battleships, 8 cruisers, 29 destroyers, 9 submarines and 50 large and small ships, as well as 4 aircraft carriers and 390 fighter jets. This Pacific Fleet posed a great threat to Japan and had to be destroyed. Politically, America and Japan were still in negotiations, and there was no diplomatic tension. American President Roosevelt even offered the Japanese emperor to join forces to reach a compromise that would preserve peace. However, Japan had no time to lose. During all these negotiations for a solution, Japan had already consumed 1/4 of its remaining oil. It had to reach the oil deposits in the East Indies as soon as possible. However, it was impossible to land in the East Indies as long as a large Pacific Fleet anchored in Pearl Harbor remained there. Therefore, they had to first destroy the Great Pacific Fleet of America and make the Pacific Ocean safe for Japan. Although Japan's navy was superior to the Pacific Fleet, the Japanese found it appropriate to destroy the fleet by making a sudden attack on the fleet anchored at Pearl Harbor instead of fighting a major naval battle. Thus, preparations and a plan were made. The Japanese navy was divided into several columns. One arm was to hit the American base in the Philippines, while the other arms were to hold the Guam, Midway and Wake Islands. The largest Japanese fleet was to make a sudden attack on the Great Pacific Fleet anchored at Pearl Harbor, destroying ships and aircraft. The most important target was America's 4 aircraft carriers. These were the aircraft carriers Enterprise, Hornet, Yorktown and Lexington. Admiral Yamamoto was put in charge of the fleet. The Japanese fleet consisted of 6 aircraft carriers, 2 battleships, 3 cruisers, 9 destroyers, 8 tankers, 23 submarines, 5 pocket submarines and 441 fighter aircraft. As the fleet moved silently to Pearl Harbor in the Pacific, America was unaware of the Japanese advance. On the morning of December 7th, 1941, American soldiers in Pearl Harbor woke up to the sound of Japanese planes. At first, the Americans thought that an exercise was being carried out, but realized that it wasn't an exercise with the sound of the first torpedo exploding at 7:55 a.m. About 300 Japanese bombers and dive bombers began to rain bombs from the sky. Surprised, the American soldiers realized the Japanese planes and began to run away. Instead of turning and fighting, most of the men ran for their lives, and the battleships Arizona, Oklahoma, Virginia and California were soon sunk. Other Japanese planes quickly headed for the planes on the American airstrip. Since the Americans parked their planes wing to wing, the Japanese had an easy job, and 155 planes were destroyed while on the ground. When the attacks on the barracks added the deaths of pilots and other personnel, approximately 2,400 American soldiers were killed. The 4 aircraft carriers, the most important target of the Japanese, were not detected by them. This raid, which lasted about 90 minutes, resulted in the decisive victory of the Japanese. A total of 16 American ships were sunk, and 188 American aircraft were destroyed. On the Japanese side, only 29 jets were lost, and 55 aviators were killed. In the end, while the Japanese almost destroyed the Great American Fleet in the Pacific Ocean and returned to Japan, The Japanese fleet, which attacked the Philippines at the same time, captured the Philippines, and it seemed that the biggest obstacle for the Japanese to reach the oil resources in the East Indies was eliminated. While America lost its large fleet in the Pacific Ocean, the Americans were infuriated by this raid, which the Japanese carried out without even informing them while they were still at the negotiating table. The Americans, who didn't want to go to war, now wanted revenge. America, under the leadership of President Roosevelt, immediately declared war on Japan, joining the Second World War on the side of the Allies. While the American people were mobilized for total war preparations, Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy declared war on the United States of America on December 11, 1941.